27 people disappeared without a trace 1 hour before I walked down the aisle, and when my FBI fiancé's phone buzzed with that encrypted call, I realized my entire life had been a carefully orchestrated lie. What started as the happiest day of my existence became a nightmare that exposed secrets buried so deep, they nearly destroyed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 2:47 p.m. on what should have been the most perfect Saturday of my life, I was standing in the bridal suite of the Willowbrook Manor, surrounded by acres of white tulle, the scent of gardenias, and an eerie silence that should have been filled with the chaos of my bridesmaids getting ready. My wedding dress, a vintage lace creation that had taken 8 months to design and cost more than my first car, hung like a ghost against the mahogany armoire, waiting for a ceremony that would never happen. I should have been laughing with my sister Harmony about our childhood memories, watching my mother Delilah fuss over every detail like she'd done for the past 18 months of wedding planning, and rolling my eyes at my father Camden's terrible jokes while he tried to hide his tears behind his reading glasses. Instead, I was alone, staring at 17 unanswered text messages and 11 missed calls, wondering how an entire family could simply vanish into thin air. My name is Juniper Ashford, and I'm a forensic accountant who specializes in tracing financial crimes for the Meridian District Attorney's Office. I hunt money trails the way bloodhounds track scents, methodically, relentlessly, and with an obsession for detail that borders on compulsive. For 6 years, I'd been the one they called when corporate executives tried to hide embezzled funds in offshore accounts, when drug dealers laundered cash through legitimate businesses, when anyone thought they could make money disappear without leaving fingerprints. Irony has a cruel sense of humor, because on the day my own family disappeared, all my professional expertise felt as useful as a chocolate teapot. The morning had started like a fairy tale. I'd woken up at 6 a.m. in my childhood bedroom in my parents' sprawling colonial house on Sycamore Ridge Drive, the same room where I'd dreamed about my wedding day since I was 7 years old. My mother had been in the kitchen at dawn, orchestrating the controlled chaos of caterers, florists, and vendors with the precision of a military general. My father was in his study, practicing his father of the bride speech for the 15th time, and my sister was already on the phone with the wedding coordinator, triple-checking every detail. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as we'd planned it. By noon, the house was buzzing with activity. The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. at the historic Rosewood Chapel, followed by a reception for 150 guests at the country club overlooking Crystal Lake. My fiancé Garrett Blackthorne, a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, had texted me at 11:30 to say he was finishing up some last-minute paperwork at the field office and would meet me at the chapel. We'd made a pact not to see each other before the ceremony, wanting to preserve that magical moment when he'd see me walking down the aisle. I'd met Garrett 3 years ago during a joint investigation involving a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. He was the federal agent assigned to the case, I was the forensic accountant tracking the money, and somewhere between analyzing spreadsheets and interviewing witnesses, we fell in love over late-night coffee and shared theories about human greed. He proposed last Christmas during a snowstorm, right here in my parents' living room, with my entire family watching and crying happy tears. My family adored him. My father said Garrett was the son he'd never had. My mother treated him like he'd already been part of the family for decades. My sister joked that he was the only man she'd ever met who could keep up with my obsessive personality and actually seemed to enjoy it. But at 1:30 p.m., when I arrived at the bridal suite to start getting ready, something felt wrong. The house had been eerily quiet when I left, but I'd assumed everyone was taking a break before the pre-ceremony rush. My bridesmaids were supposed to meet me at 2 p.m. for hair and makeup. My family was supposed to arrive by 2:30 for photos. 2 p.m. came and went. Then 2:30. Then 3 p.m. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I called my mother first. Straight to voicemail. Then my father. Voicemail. My sister. Voicemail. I tried my Aunt Rebecca, my Uncle Theodore, my cousin Maxine, everyone who was supposed to be at the wedding. Every single call went directly to voicemail, as if they'd all simultaneously turned off their phones. That's when the real panic set in, the kind of cold dread that starts in your stomach and spreads through your entire body like poison. I'm a woman who solves mysteries for a living, who can find hidden financial connections that others miss, who prides herself on logical thinking and methodical problem solving. But standing in that bridal suite, wearing nothing but a silk robe and growing desperation, I felt completely helpless. I called the wedding coordinator, thinking maybe there had been some miscommunication about timing. She hadn't heard from anyone in my family since the morning check-in. I called the caterers, the florists, the photographer. No one had seen them. I even called my parents' neighbors, wondering if there had been some kind of emergency, but the Hendersons said the house looked empty when they'd driven by an hour ago. 27 people. My parents, my sister, 4 bridesmaids, 6 groomsmen, 12 family members, and 3 family friends who were supposed to be in the wedding party. All of them had simply vanished without explanation, without warning, without a single goodbye. If you've ever planned a wedding, you know that people don't just disappear an hour before the ceremony. There are schedules and responsibilities and 1,000 moving pieces that require constant communication. People who've been excited about an event for months don't suddenly go silent when it's time to celebrate. But that's exactly what happened. And if you're sitting there thinking this sounds impossible, that families don't just evaporate into thin air, well, keep watching. Because what I discovered in the next few hours changed everything I thought I knew about the people I'd trusted my entire life. The truth was so much worse than I could have imagined. To understand why what happened next was so devastating, you need to know that I wasn't just some random bride having a panic attack. I was Juniper Ashford, the forensic accountant who'd cracked the Meridian investment scandal that saved 3,000 retirees from losing their life savings. I was the woman who'd traced $47 million in hidden cartel money through 17 different shell companies and 4 countries. I was the person the district attorney called when billion-dollar crimes needed to be unraveled one receipt at a time. For 6 years, I'd been the invisible guardian angel of financial justice in Meridian County. While other investigators chased flashy suspects and dramatic arrests, I sat in windowless offices with nothing but spreadsheets, bank records, and an almost supernatural ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. I could track money through maze-like corporate structures, spot fraudulent transactions buried in thousands of legitimate ones, and reconstruct financial crimes from the smallest digital breadcrumbs. My colleagues called me the Bloodhound, because once I caught the scent of financial deception, I never let go. I'd spend entire weekends following paper trails that led to major arrests. I'd testified in federal court against corporate executives who thought their MBAs and expensive lawyers made them untouchable. I'd helped send 14 people to prison and recovered over $200 million in stolen assets. But my real superpower wasn't just finding money, it was understanding people. 6 years of forensic accounting had taught me that every financial crime tells a story about human nature. Greed leaves patterns. Desperation creates specific behaviors. Fear manifests in predictable ways. I could look at someone's spending habits and tell you if they were planning to disappear, having an affair, or hiding assets from a divorce. I knew that people don't just change their entire financial behavior overnight without a reason. I knew that when someone starts liquidating assets, buying prepaid cards, or making unusual cash withdrawals, they're preparing for something. I knew that innocent people don't suddenly stop using credit cards, close bank accounts, or transfer money to offshore accounts. Most importantly, I knew my own family. My father, Camden Ashford, was a retired high school principal who balanced his checkbook to the penny every month and had never made a financial decision without discussing it with my mother first. He drove the same Honda Accord for 12 years, bought his clothes at department store sales, and considered a dinner at Applebee's a splurge. His idea of financial risk-taking was buying name-brand cereal instead of the store brand. My mother, Delilah, had been a librarian for 34 years before retiring. She clipped coupons, maintained a detailed household budget in a spiral notebook, and still wrote physical checks for bills because she didn't trust online banking. She kept every receipt, organized their tax documents with color-coded folders, and could tell you exactly how much they'd spent on groceries in any given month for the past decade. My sister Harmony was a pediatric nurse who lived in a modest apartment, drove a used Toyota, and saved religiously for vacations she planned 2 years in advance. She was the most organized person I knew, her closet was arranged by color and season, her kitchen cabinets were labeled, and she maintained detailed spreadsheets for everything from her marathon training schedule to her monthly expenses. These were not people who made impulsive decisions. These were not people who disappeared without explanation. These were the most predictably responsible, financially conservative, communication-obsessed people on the planet. And yet, as I sat in that bridal suite at 3:15 p.m., frantically calling everyone I could think of, a horrible thought began creeping into my mind. What if their disappearance wasn't random? What if it wasn't an accident or emergency? What if someone who understood exactly how to make people vanish without a trace had targeted my family specifically? See, here's what most people don't understand about making someone disappear. It's not about violence or kidnapping or dramatic Hollywood scenarios. It's about information control. It's about knowing someone's patterns well enough to disrupt them without leaving evidence. It's about understanding their relationships, their routines, their vulnerabilities. And I knew that in my 6 years of forensic accounting, I'd made some very powerful, very dangerous enemies. There was Roberto Castillo, the construction company owner I'd helped convict for embezzling $12 million in city contracts. He'd looked me straight in the eye during sentencing and said, "You have no idea what you've cost me, little girl." There was Patricia Wainwright, the investment advisor who'd stolen retirement funds from elderly clients. Her husband had sent me anonymous threats for months after her conviction. Most recently, there was the Meridian investment case, a massive Ponzi scheme that had tentacles reaching into some of the most respected families in the county. When we'd finally unraveled that web, we discovered that the scheme involved not just financial fraud, but money laundering for organizations that didn't take kindly to having their cash flow disrupted. The lead prosecutor had recommended that I consider relocating after that case closed. He'd said it in a joking way, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't entirely kidding. I'd brushed off his concern because I was Juniper Ashford, the woman who solved unsolvable financial crimes. I was the hunter, not the prey. But sitting in that empty bridal suite, surrounded by wedding decorations that now felt like funeral flowers, I realized something that made my blood run cold. If someone wanted to hurt me, really hurt me in a way that would destroy me completely, they wouldn't come after me directly. They'd come after the people I loved most. They'd wait for the day when I was supposed to be happiest, most vulnerable, most distracted. They'd wait for my wedding day, when my guard was down and my entire family was gathered in one place. They'd wait for the moment when losing everyone would cause the maximum possible psychological damage. And they'd make sure that the person who spent her career tracking the untraceable would be faced with a mystery she couldn't solve, the disappearance of the only people who mattered more to her than justice. I'd always prided myself on being 3 steps ahead of the criminals I pursued. But as I looked at my phone showing 17 missed calls to my family members, I realized that for the first time in my professional life, someone might have been 3 steps ahead of me. The question was, who was smart enough, connected enough, and angry enough to orchestrate something this sophisticated? And more terrifyingly, what did they want from me that was worth destroying an entire family to get? At 3:22 p.m., while I was spiraling through worst-case scenarios and calling every hospital in a 50-mile radius, my phone finally rang. Not my family, not my bridesmaids, not anyone I was desperately hoping to hear from. It was Garrett. "Juniper, sweetheart, I know you're probably getting ready, but I need to ask you something." His voice had that careful, controlled tone he used when he was working a case, not the warm, excited voice of a groom 3 hours before his wedding. "Have you heard from your family in the last few hours?" The question hit me like ice water. "Garrett, that's exactly what I was about to ask you. They're all gone. Every single person who was supposed to be here has vanished. I've been calling everyone for over an hour and..." "Juniper." The way he said my name stopped me mid-sentence. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Fear. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag. Right now. Don't go home. Don't go to your parents' house. Meet me at the Fairmont Hotel on Riverside Drive, room 847. Use the back entrance." "What?" "Garrett, what are you talking about? Our wedding is in 40 minutes. The guests are probably already arriving at the chapel. I can't just. The wedding is cancelled. His voice was flat, final. Juniper, your family wasn't randomly abducted. This is connected to a case I've been working on for 8 months. A case I should have told you about weeks ago. The world tilted sideways. I sat down hard on the velvet chair in the corner of the bridal suite, my legs suddenly unable to support me. What case? What are you talking about? I can't explain over the phone. Just please, trust me. Pack light, bring your laptop and any backup drives you have, and meet me at the hotel. We'll figure this out together. Garrett, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. We both should be. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a full 30 seconds, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. My FBI fiancé had just told me that my family's disappearance was connected to one of his cases. A case he'd apparently been hiding from me for 8 months. 8 months that covered our entire engagement period. The rational part of my mind tried to make sense of it. Federal agents worked classified cases all the time. Garrett couldn't tell me about everything he was investigating. I knew that when we started dating. But this wasn't just any case. This was something that apparently put my entire family in danger, something serious enough to make him cancel our wedding with 40 minutes notice. But there was another part of my mind, the forensic accountant part that had been trained to spot deception and hidden agendas, that was asking much darker questions. How did Garrett know my family was missing before I told him? How did he know it wasn't random? And why was his first instinct to tell me to run instead of calling in the FBI to find them? I'd been with Garrett for 3 years. I knew his tells, his habits, his professional patterns. When he was working a standard financial crimes case, he'd come home excited to share the details he was allowed to discuss. He'd ask for my input on money laundering schemes, pick my brain about offshore banking regulations, bounce theories off me during our late-night conversations. But over the past 8 months, he'd been different. More secretive, more distant. He'd started taking calls in the other room, staying late at the office more frequently, and deflecting my questions about his current cases with vague answers about nothing interesting or routine fraud investigations. At the time, I'd assumed he was just dealing with a particularly sensitive case or maybe feeling pressure from his supervisors. Federal agents went through phases of intense work, and I'd respected his need for professional boundaries. I'd even found it somewhat charming that he was so dedicated to protecting classified information. Now, sitting in my wedding dress that I'd never get to wear, I realized that my fiancé had been lying to me for months about something serious enough to make my entire family disappear. I should have packed a bag and met him at the hotel. I should have trusted the man I was supposed to marry in 37 minutes. But 6 years of forensic accounting had taught me that when someone's story doesn't add up, you don't just accept their explanations, you start asking harder questions. So instead of packing, I opened my laptop. If Garrett had been working on a case for 8 months that somehow involved my family, there would be traces of it somewhere. FBI agents might be good at keeping secrets from civilians, but they weren't necessarily good at hiding digital footprints from forensic accountants who specialized in finding hidden connections. I started with Garrett's credit card records, something I had access to because we'd been planning to merge our finances after the wedding. Most federal agents were careful about operational security, but they were human. They made purchases, used government credit cards, stayed in hotels, rented cars. Financial transactions always left trails. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 8 months, Garrett had made multiple trips to cities I didn't know he'd visited. Las Vegas, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago. Always short trips, always charged to his government card, always during times when he told me he was working local cases. The hotel charges were to expensive properties, not the budget chains the FBI typically used for routine investigations. More concerning were the cash withdrawals. Large ones, from ATMs in neighborhoods that had nothing to do with federal law enforcement. The pattern suggested surveillance work, possibly undercover operations, possibly something much more complicated. But the detail that made my blood run cold was simpler and more personal. Garrett had been investigating something in Meridian County for 8 months. The same 8 months when I'd been working on the biggest case of my career, the Meridian investment scandal. The same case that had involved money laundering for organizations dangerous enough to make the lead prosecutor suggest I consider relocating. The same case where I'd uncovered financial connections that reached into some of the most powerful families in the county. I thought about our relationship timeline. Garrett and I had met 3 years ago during a joint federal-local investigation. He'd been assigned to the case, I'd been brought in as the forensic accountant, and we'd fallen in love while working together. It had felt like fate, like the universe had conspired to bring two people together who shared a passion for financial justice. But now, looking at his financial records through the lens of suspicious timing, I realized something that made me physically sick. What if our meeting hadn't been coincidental? What if Garrett hadn't been assigned to that first case randomly? What if our entire relationship had been part of a longer, more complex operation? What if the man I was supposed to marry in 33 minutes had been investigating me all along? My phone buzzed with a text from Garrett. "Juniper, are you on your way? This is urgent. People's lives are at stake." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. People's lives were definitely at stake. My family was missing, my wedding was cancelled, and my fiancé was apparently involved in something that he'd been hiding from me for 8 months. But I wasn't going to that hotel room. Not yet. Not until I understood exactly what I was walking into. Because if there was one thing 6 years of forensic accounting had taught me, it was this: when someone you trust starts lying to you about money and timing, you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You start treating them like a suspect. My phone started ringing immediately after I ignored Garrett's text. First one call, then another, then a rapid succession of calls that I let go straight to voicemail. Each missed call felt like another piece of evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. While my phone buzzed with increasing urgency, I dove deeper into Garrett's financial records, and what I found made my wedding dress feel like a costume I'd been wearing in someone else's play. The Las Vegas trip from 6 months ago. It coincided exactly with the weekend I'd told him I was visiting my college roommate in Portland. I'd shown him my plane tickets, shared my itinerary, even sent him photos from the airport. But according to his credit card records, he'd been in Nevada that same weekend, staying at the Bellagio and making charges at high-end restaurants and casinos. Not exactly standard FBI behavior. The Miami trip from 4 months ago lined up with a weekend when he'd claimed to have the flu. I'd offered to bring him soup, to take care of him, but he'd insisted he needed to isolate and rest. Meanwhile, his government card showed charges at Miami Beach hotels and expenses that suggested meetings with multiple people. But the detail that made my hands shake was much more recent. 3 weeks ago, Garrett had told me he was attending a federal law enforcement conference in Washington, D.C. I'd even helped him pack, kissed him goodbye at the airport, and spent the weekend finalizing wedding seating charts while he was supposedly in boring seminars about financial crimes. Except his credit card showed he'd never been to D.C. Instead, he'd been in Chicago, staying at a hotel 2 blocks from the federal building where the lead prosecutor from my Meridian investment case had been transferred 6 months ago. The same prosecutor who'd suggested I consider relocating after we'd closed the case. The same prosecutor who'd seemed genuinely concerned about my safety. I pulled up the calendar on my laptop and started cross-referencing Garrett's mysterious trips with significant dates in my own professional life. The pattern that emerged was too precise to be coincidental. Every major development in the Meridian investment case had been followed within weeks by one of Garrett's secret trips. When I'd identified the shell companies used for money laundering, Garrett had made an unexplained trip to Atlanta. When I'd traced the offshore accounts to a network of international banks, he'd disappeared to Las Vegas for a routine case. When I'd finally connected the financial web to several prominent local families, he'd gone to Miami. It was as if someone had been tracking my progress and sending Garrett to report on my findings in person. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Garrett. It was a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. "Is this Juniper Ashford?" The voice was professional, female, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Vivian Ross. I'm calling from Meridian General Hospital. I have some information about your family." My heart stopped. "Are they hurt? Are they okay? I've been trying to find them for hours." Miss Ashford, I need you to listen carefully. Your family members were brought to the hospital approximately 2 hours ago. They're alive, but they're in a very delicate situation. I can't discuss their condition over the phone, but I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Which hospital? I'll be right there. Meridian General, but Ms. Ashford, it's very important that you come alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. There are complications that require discretion. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. A doctor from Meridian General had my family. They were alive but in some kind of delicate situation, and I needed to come alone without telling anyone. It should have been a relief to finally have information about where they were. Instead, every instinct I developed as a forensic accountant was screaming that something was wrong. First, hospitals don't typically call family members with vague messages about delicate situations, without providing any specifics about injuries or conditions. Medical professionals are trained to give clear, factual information about patient status. Second, the instruction to come alone and not tell anyone was completely contrary to standard hospital protocol. When multiple family members are involved in an incident serious enough to hospitalize them, hospitals typically encourage family support and communication. Third, the timing felt too convenient. My family disappears, Garrett calls with mysterious knowledge and instructions to run, and then a hospital calls with cryptic information about their condition, all within the span of 2 hours. But there was something else bothering me, something more subtle. The woman who'd called herself Dr. Vivian Ross had spoken with the kind of practiced authority that came from training, but her phrasing had been slightly off. She'd said my family had been brought to the hospital rather than admitted or transferred. The word choice suggested they hadn't come voluntarily. I pulled up the Meridian General Hospital website and searched for Dr. Vivian Ross. No results. I tried different spellings, checked the staff directory, even searched for physicians with similar names. Nothing. That's when I called the hospital directly. Meridian General Hospital, how can I help you? Hi, I'm trying to reach Dr. Vivian Ross. I believe she's in your emergency department. I'm sorry, we don't have any physician by that name. Could you spell the last name for me? I spelled it 3 different ways. No Dr. Ross, no Dr. Roth, no Dr. Rossi. No one with that first name either. Ma'am, are you sure you have the right hospital? We have a very complete directory, and I'm not finding anyone matching that description. I hung up and immediately called back, asking to speak to the emergency department directly. Emergency department, this is Nurse Patricia. Hi, I'm wondering if you've had any patients brought in this afternoon with the last name Ashford. There would be multiple family members. Let me check. I'm sorry, we haven't had any patients by that name today. Is this regarding an emergency? My blood turned to ice. Dr. Vivian Ross didn't exist. My family wasn't at Meridian General Hospital. Someone had just tried to lure me to a location using false information about my missing family members. Someone who knew exactly how desperate I was to find them. Someone who understood that a fake hospital call would be the perfect way to get me to leave the safety of a public location and go somewhere alone. My phone buzzed with another text from Garrett. Juniper, time is running out. I know you're scared, but you need to trust me. Meet me at the hotel now. Then another text, this one from the number that had claimed to be Dr. Ross. Ms. Ashford, your family's condition is deteriorating. Please come immediately. 2 different people were trying to get me to 2 different locations, both claiming urgency, both insisting I come alone. My fiancé was trying to get me to a hotel room after revealing he'd been hiding an 8-month investigation. A fake doctor was trying to lure me to a hospital using false information about my family. The only thing I knew for certain was that someone was playing an extremely sophisticated game, and I was the target. I looked around the bridal suite at the flowers, the carefully arranged makeup stations, the wedding dress hanging like a ghost. 6 hours ago, I'd been the happiest woman in Meridian County, surrounded by love and preparing for the most important day of my life. Now I was alone, my family was missing, my fiancé appeared to be lying to me, and strangers were using elaborate deceptions to try to manipulate me into going places where I'd be vulnerable. The question was, Who wanted me isolated badly enough to orchestrate something this complex? And what did they plan to do with me once they got me alone? I was about to find out that the answer was much worse than I could have imagined. At 4:15 p.m., exactly when I should have been walking down the aisle, my laptop chimed with an email notification that changed everything. The sender was listed as a friend, and the subject line read, "You're asking the right questions, but you're running out of time." My hands were shaking as I opened it. "Miss Ashford, you're wise not to trust the hospital call or meet your fiancé at the hotel. Both are traps. Your family is alive, but their safety depends on your next decisions. Agent Blackthorne has been feeding information about your investigations to the Kozlov organization for 18 months. The Meridian investment case threatened to expose a money laundering operation worth $400 million annually. They've been planning this day for months. Your wedding was supposed to be your execution, disguised as a tragic accident. Check the church basement. You have 90 minutes before they move your family permanently. Trust no one in law enforcement. Someone who remembers what justice actually means." I read the email 3 times, my mind struggling to process the implications. The Kozlov organization, I'd encountered that name buried deep in the Meridian investment case files. They were mentioned in a few encrypted communications we'd partially decoded, but we'd never been able to establish concrete connections. The name had appeared in financial records associated with several shell companies, but every time we tried to trace it further, the trail had gone cold. If this email was accurate, Garrett hadn't just been hiding a case from me. He'd been actively working for the people I'd been investigating. Our entire relationship, our engagement, our wedding, all of it had been an elaborate setup to get close to me and monitor my progress. But the detail that made my blood freeze was the mention of the church basement. Rosewood Chapel, where our wedding was supposed to be happening right now, had a basement that was rarely used except for storage. If someone wanted to stage an accident at a wedding, a basement incident would be perfect: structural collapse, gas leak, electrical fire. Something that would look tragic but not suspicious. Something that would eliminate the forensic accountant who'd gotten too close to a $400 million money laundering operation. I grabbed my laptop and started researching the Kozlov organization with the desperate intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding her enemy. What I found in the next 30 minutes painted a picture that made the hairs on my neck stand up. The Kozlov organization wasn't just a financial crime syndicate. They were a sophisticated international network that specialized in eliminating threats to their operations through what they called life integration, inserting operatives into targets' personal lives for months or years before executing plans that looked like accidents, coincidences, or natural events. Their methods were legendary in law enforcement circles, but proving their involvement was nearly impossible because they planned so far ahead and integrated so deeply into their targets' lives. They didn't just kill people, they destroyed them systematically by corrupting the relationships and institutions they trusted most. A federal agent getting close to a target, proposing marriage, planning a wedding, and then orchestrating a tragic accident on what should have been the happiest day of her life. It was exactly their style. My phone rang. This time it was a number I recognized, my college roommate Amanda, calling from Portland. Juniper. "Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? I just got the strangest call from someone claiming to be your sister, asking me to confirm details about our friendship and your college years." "What kind of details?" "Weird stuff. What sorority you were in, who you dated, what your favorite classes were, whether you'd ever mentioned having trust issues or paranoia." It felt like someone was building a psychological profile. I didn't answer any of the questions, but Juniper, it was really unsettling. Who would want to know that kind of information about you? The answer hit me like a physical blow. Someone who was planning to discredit anything I might try to say about what was happening to me. If I survived whatever they had planned and tried to tell law enforcement that my FBI fiancé was working for a criminal organization, they'd need to make me look unstable, paranoid, delusional. They were building a narrative in which Juniper Ashford, the brilliant forensic accountant, had suffered a psychological breakdown on her wedding day, developed paranoid delusions about her loving fiancé, and made wild accusations against respected law enforcement officials. Amanda, listen to me very carefully. If anyone else calls asking about me, don't answer any questions. Tell them you haven't spoken to me in months. And if something happens to me, if you hear that I had an accident or that I made crazy accusations against people, don't believe it. Whatever you hear in the news, remember this conversation. Juniper, you're scaring me. What's going on? I can't explain right now, but I need you to do something for me. I'm going to send you some files. Don't open them, don't look at them, just store them somewhere safe. If anything happens to me, give them to the federal prosecutor's office in Chicago. Ask for someone who used to work on the Meridian investment case. I quickly encrypted my research files about the Kozlov organization and the evidence I'd found about Garrett's secret trips, then sent everything to Amanda's secure email account. If they succeeded in eliminating me, at least someone would have the information needed to understand what had really happened. At 4:45 p.m., another email arrived from a friend. You're learning quickly, but they know you're researching them. Blackthorn is heading to the chapel now with a tactical team. They're going to claim they're responding to a hostage situation involving your family. The official story will be that you barricaded yourself in the church basement and accidentally triggered an explosion while in a delusional state. You have maybe 30 minutes before they're in position. There's a way to save your family, but it requires you to stop thinking like a forensic accountant and start thinking like a predator. The storage unit you rented 6 months ago, Unit 247 at Secure Store on Industrial Boulevard. The evidence you've been collecting isn't just about the Meridian case. Go there. Trust your instincts. A friend. I stared at the email in confusion. I'd never rented a storage unit on Industrial Boulevard. I'd never rented a storage unit anywhere. But the specificity of the details, the unit number, the facility name, the exact timeline, suggested that either someone was trying to manipulate me into another trap, or there was something about my own life that I didn't understand. Then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. 6 months ago, around the time I'd started uncovering the deeper connections in the Meridian investment case, I'd gone through a period of what I'd thought was stress-induced forgetfulness. I'd lost track of entire afternoons, found notes in my own handwriting that I didn't remember writing, discovered research files on my computer that seemed familiar but incomplete. At the time, I'd attributed it to working too hard, staying up too late, and the pressure of handling such a complex case. But what if it hadn't been stress? What if someone had been drugging me, creating gaps in my memory during which they could access my research or make me do things I wouldn't remember? What if I had rented that storage unit, during one of those lost afternoons, and stored evidence there that I'd forgotten about? My phone buzzed with a text from Garrett. Juniper, I'm at the chapel with backup. There are dangerous people looking for you. Come to the basement entrance. We can protect you. Another text from the fake Dr. Ross number. Your family's condition is critical. We're moving them to intensive care. Last chance to see them. And then a third text from an unknown number. Unit 247. Whatever you find there, use it wisely. They're coming. 3 different people were trying to control my next move. My fiancé wanted me at the church basement, exactly where the anonymous emailer had warned me not to go. A fake doctor was still trying to lure me to a hospital where my family wasn't. And someone else was directing me to a storage unit I didn't remember renting. I looked at my laptop screen, at the evidence I'd compiled about Garrett's lies and the Kozlov organization's methods. I thought about my missing family, my cancelled wedding, and the growing certainty that I was at the center of something much larger and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. For 6 years, I'd built my career on following paper trails, trusting evidence, and making logical deductions based on verifiable facts. But now I was facing a situation where every piece of information could be a lie, every person could be an enemy, and every logical choice could be a trap. I had to make a decision that would either save my family or destroy everything I'd ever cared about. And I had to make it in the next few minutes, with nothing to guide me but instincts I'd never had to trust with life or death consequences. The storage unit was 15 minutes away. The chapel was 12 minutes in the opposite direction. The hospital was 20 minutes from either location. I closed my laptop, grabbed my phone and keys, and made the choice that would determine whether I lived to see another day. I drove to the storage facility like a woman possessed, running red lights and taking corners at speeds that would have terrified me under normal circumstances. But nothing about this day was normal, and I was operating on pure adrenaline and the desperate hope that somewhere in Unit 247, I'd find the key to saving my family. Secure Store on Industrial Boulevard looked like every other storage facility in America, rows of beige metal buildings, keypad-controlled gates, and security cameras that probably hadn't been serviced in years. I pulled up to the main gate and stared at the keypad, realizing I had no idea what code I might have used 6 months ago during one of those memory gaps. Then I tried the most logical option, my parents' anniversary date, the same number I used for everything important. The gate clicked open. Unit 247 was in the back section of the facility, tucked between larger units that looked like they stored furniture and business equipment. The padlock was a heavy-duty model that required a key, not a combination. I checked my keychain and found a small silver key that I didn't recognize, but that fit perfectly. Inside the unit was a single folding table, a laptop I'd never seen before, and 3 banker's boxes labeled with dates from 6 months ago. On top of the laptop was a note in my own handwriting. If you're reading this, they succeeded in making you forget. Everything you need to know is in these files. Trust yourself. J. I opened the laptop and found it was already logged in. The desktop contained dozens of folders with names like Kozlov Financial Network, Blackthorn Surveillance Evidence, and Family Protection Protocol. The timestamps on the files showed they'd been created and modified over a period of several weeks, always during times when I thought I'd been suffering from stress-induced memory gaps. The first folder I opened contained surveillance photos of Garrett meeting with people I didn't recognize in parking garages, hotel lobbies, and restaurants. The photos were timestamped and cross-referenced with his credit card records, the same records I'd discovered earlier today. But these files went much deeper. They included audio recordings of phone conversations, copies of encrypted text messages, and financial documents that proved Garrett had been receiving payments from shell companies connected to the Kozlov organization. But the folder that made my hands shake was labeled Wedding Day Protocol. Inside were detailed plans for what was supposed to happen today. Garrett was supposed to ensure I arrived at the chapel by 4 p.m. A gas leak would be discovered in the basement during the ceremony, requiring evacuation of the main sanctuary. I would be directed to a safe area in the basement with my immediate family while emergency responders assessed the situation. A carefully timed explosion would eliminate me, my parents, my sister, and anyone else who might have knowledge about my investigations. The plan included backup protocols if I didn't arrive at the chapel on time. The fake hospital call was option B. If that failed, they had prepared option C, a staged home invasion at my parents' house that would look like a robbery gone wrong. My family hadn't disappeared randomly. They'd been taken to a secure location until Garrett could deliver me to the chapel for the primary plan. If I failed to appear, they would be eliminated as part of one of the backup scenarios. But the most chilling part of the files was a document titled Psychological Profile and Discrediting Strategy. It contained detailed analysis of my personality, my relationships, my professional reputation, and my potential reactions to stress. They'd planned not just to kill me, but to destroy my credibility first in case I managed to survive and expose them. The profile included quotes from interviews they'd conducted with my colleagues, friends, and even my college professors. They'd been building a case that I was brilliant but unstable, prone to obsessive behavior and paranoid thinking. If their primary plan failed and I tried to expose the conspiracy, they could present evidence that I'd suffered a mental breakdown triggered by wedding stress. I scrolled through months of surveillance reports, financial records, and strategic planning documents. The scope of their operation was staggering. They'd been monitoring me for over 18 months, mapping my relationships, studying my habits, and planning multiple contingency scenarios for my elimination. But buried in the final folder, I found something that changed everything, a complete backup of their communications network, including real-time access to their command center. Apparently, during one of my memory-suppressed sessions, I'd managed to install malware on a device belonging to one of their operatives. The malware had been quietly collecting their internal communications, location data, and operational plans for months. I had real-time access to their entire network. I could see their current positions, their communications with each other, and most importantly, the location where they were holding my family. According to the GPS data, my parents and sister were being held in a warehouse 15 minutes away on the industrial side of town. Garrett was indeed at the chapel with a tactical team, but they weren't law enforcement. They were Kozlov operatives dressed as federal agents. The fake Dr. Ross was positioned at the hospital with another team, ready to intercept me if I chose that option. But now I had something they didn't know I possessed: complete information about their operation and the ability to monitor their communications in real time. I opened their communication channel and saw a stream of messages that made my blood run cold. Target hasn't arrived at chapel. Basement charges set for 5:30 p.m. regardless. Hospital team reports no contact. She's not coming. Blackthorn requesting permission to proceed with option C, family elimination and staged break-in. Approved. Execute option C at 6 p.m. if target not acquired by 5:45. I had 45 minutes before they killed my family, whether they captured me or not. But now I had their complete operational plans, their locations, their communication channels, and something else: a recorded confession from Garrett explaining the entire operation to his Kozlov handlers. In the recording, made just 2 hours ago, Garrett detailed how he'd infiltrated my life, manipulated my investigations, and coordinated with the organization to eliminate the threat I posed to their money laundering operation. He'd even laughed about how easy it had been to make me fall in love with him, how I'd never suspected that our entire relationship was a professional assignment. I sat in that storage unit, surrounded by evidence of the most elaborate betrayal I could have imagined, and felt something shift inside me. The fear, the confusion, the desperate need to understand what was happening, all of it crystallized into something harder and more focused. They'd made one critical mistake in their planning. They'd assumed that because they could manipulate my memory, they could control my actions. They'd assumed that a forensic accountant who spent her career following paper trails would be helpless in a situation requiring improvisation and strategic thinking. They'd underestimated what happens when you push someone who's dedicated her life to justice into a corner where her family's lives depend on her next moves. I loaded all the evidence onto encrypted drives, copied the malware access codes, and began typing a message that would either save my family or get us all killed. But for the first time in hours, I felt like I was in control of the situation. Because they might have planned for every possible reaction from the scared, confused woman they thought I was. But they hadn't planned for what I was about to become: someone who had nothing left to lose and every reason to destroy them completely. I opened their communication channel and sent a message that would change everything. This is Juniper Ashford. I have your complete network, your operational plans, and recorded confessions from all your operatives. You have 20 minutes to release my family unharmed, or I release everything to every federal agency, news outlet, and law enforcement contact I have. Your choice. The woman who's about to end your organization. The response came immediately: you have no idea what you're dealing with. I typed back: I'm a forensic accountant who just spent 6 hours uncovering an 18-month operation you thought was foolproof. Trust me, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. 19 minutes and counting. Then I sent everything I'd found to 7 different federal agencies simultaneously, with instructions to open the files if I didn't check in within the next hour. The nuclear option was armed. Now we'd see who blinked first. The response to my ultimatum came faster than I expected, and it wasn't through their communication channel. My phone rang with a call from Garrett. Juniper, you need to stop this immediately. His voice was different now, no more pretense of concern, no more fake warmth. This was the real Garrett, the operative who'd spent 18 months manipulating my life. You have no idea how many people you're putting at risk. The only people at risk are my family, and you're the one who put them there. I kept my voice steady, but my hands were shaking as I monitored their communication channel on the laptop screen. I could see messages flying between operatives: target has compromised network, initiate emergency protocols, move to secondary locations immediately. You think you're clever because you found some files in a storage unit? You think you understand what's happening here? Garrett's laugh was cold. Those files were placed there for you to find. We've been feeding you information for months, letting you think you were investigating us while we controlled exactly what you discovered. Then explain this, I said, and played back a portion of his recorded confession through the phone. His own voice came through clearly. The target has been completely compromised. She has no idea that every major discovery in her investigation was guided by our intelligence. When we eliminate her tomorrow, it will look like a tragic accident during the happiest day of her life. The silence on his end lasted exactly 7 seconds. I know because I was counting. You recorded our operational briefings. I recorded everything. Your meetings, your payments, your plans to murder my entire family. And in 15 minutes, if my family isn't released safely, every federal agency in the country is going to have copies of all of it. Juniper, listen to me very carefully. The Kozlov organization has resources you can't imagine. They have people in law enforcement, in government, in agencies you think you can trust. If you release those files, you'll be signing death warrants for dozens of innocent people. The only innocent people I care about are currently being held in a warehouse on Industrial Boulevard because of you. Another pause. Then, how did you? Never mind. You're right about one thing. Your family is being held, and their safety depends on your cooperation. But not in the way you think. On the laptop screen, I watched as new messages appeared in their communication channel. Blackthorn unable to secure compliance. Execute contingency 7, relocate assets to backup facility. My blood went cold. They were moving my family. You have 12 minutes to get to the warehouse, Garrett continued. Come alone, no weapons, no backup, no communications. Exchange yourself for your family. It's the only way this ends without everyone dying. You mean it's the only way you can still complete your mission? I mean it's the only way your parents and sister live through the next hour. His voice hardened. The charges are already set at the warehouse. If you don't arrive by 6 p.m., or if any law enforcement shows up, the building becomes a crater. Your choice. The line went dead. I stared at the laptop screen, watching their communications in real time. The messages confirmed what Garrett had just told me: warehouse rigged with redundant charges, detonation at 6 p.m. regardless of target status, secondary facility prepared for asset transfer if target complies. They weren't just threatening to kill my family. They were going to kill them regardless, and they wanted me there so they could eliminate all of us simultaneously. Even if I traded myself for my family, they'd just kill us all together. But as I scrolled through more of their messages, I found something that gave me hope. The warehouse wasn't the only location involved in their operation. They had multiple facilities, command posts, and staging areas scattered throughout the city. Most importantly, they had a central command center that was coordinating all their operations. And according to the GPS data I was monitoring, that command center was located in a building I recognized, the Meridian Financial Center, the same building where the original Ponzi scheme had been headquartered. I opened a new document and began typing frantically. If I was going to die in the next hour, I was going to make sure my death accomplished something meaningful. I compiled everything I'd learned about the Kozlov organization, their methods, their personnel, and their current operations into a comprehensive intelligence report. But more than that, I included detailed instructions for law enforcement on how to dismantle their entire network. I had their communication codes, their operational procedures, their financial accounts, and the locations of all their facilities. I had enough information to destroy them completely. I uploaded the file to a secure server with instructions to release it automatically if I didn't check in every 6 hours. Then I sent copies to Amanda in Portland, to my former colleague at the prosecutor's office in Chicago, and to the one FBI agent I'd worked with years ago who I was reasonably certain wasn't corrupted. At 5:47 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number: "Your family is safe. Meet me at the Meridian Financial Center, 23rd floor. Come alone. You have one chance to end this without more bloodshed. A real friend." I looked at the laptop screen. According to their communications, their command center was on the 23rd floor of the Meridian Financial Center. Either someone was trying to lure me into another trap, or someone inside their organization was offering me a way out. I had 8 minutes to decide whether to go to the warehouse where my family was supposedly being held, or to the financial center where their command operation was located. Both could be traps. Both could be my only chance to save the people I loved. But as I studied their communication patterns, I noticed something crucial. The messages about moving my family to a secondary facility weren't coming from the warehouse location. They were coming from the financial center. My family wasn't at the warehouse anymore. They'd been moved to the building where the Kozlov organization was running their operation. Which meant that whoever had sent me the text about meeting at the financial center either knew where my family really was, or was trying to get me to the same location where they were planning to eliminate all of us. I grabbed the encrypted drives, closed the laptop, and made a decision that went against every rational instinct I had. Instead of calling law enforcement, instead of trying to coordinate a rescue operation, instead of following any sensible protocol for dealing with a hostage situation, I drove to the Meridian Financial Center. Because I'd realized something about the Kozlov organization that they probably didn't expect me to understand. They'd spent 18 months studying my psychology, my patterns, my predictable responses to stress and crisis. They knew how a forensic accountant would typically handle a complex problem, methodically, carefully, following established procedures. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They'd pushed me past the point where I was thinking like a forensic accountant. I was thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose and only one chance to save the people who mattered most to her. I was thinking like someone who was about to walk into the heart of their operation and burn it down from the inside. As I pulled into the parking garage of the Meridian Financial Center at 5:54 p.m., I sent one final message to Amanda. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, release everything. Make sure the world knows what happened here. J. Then I walked into the building where my family was being held and where I was probably going to die. But I wasn't going to die quietly. The Meridian Financial Center after hours was a tomb of glass and steel, with only security lighting illuminating the empty lobbies and corridors. I'd been in this building dozens of times during the original Ponzi scheme investigation, but tonight it felt like entering the belly of a beast that had been waiting 18 months to swallow me whole. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor gave me 2 minutes to study the building directory and plan my approach. According to the listing, floor 23 housed Meridian Consulting Services, a company that definitely hadn't existed when I'd investigated this building 2 years ago. The Kozlov organization had been using the same location where their money laundering operation had been exposed to run their command center. There was a sick poetry to it. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway that looked nothing like the generic office space I'd expected. Instead, it had been transformed into something that resembled a high-tech operations center, with multiple workstations, wall-mounted monitors displaying financial data and surveillance feeds, and enough communication equipment to run a small war. And there, sitting calmly at the central workstation, was a woman I recognized but had never expected to see again. Federal Prosecutor Catherine Blackwell. The same prosecutor who'd handled the original Meridian investment case. The same woman who'd been transferred to Chicago 6 months ago. The same person who'd suggested I consider relocating for my own safety. Hello, Juniper. I'm sorry we had to meet again under these circumstances. I kept my distance, my hand on the door handle. You're a real friend? You're the one who's been sending me information. I'm the one who's been trying to keep you alive for the past 8 months. Catherine stood slowly, her hands visible and empty. I'm also the one who's going to help you save your family, but we don't have much time. Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't another trap? Catherine gestured to one of the monitors, which showed a live feed of my parents and sister sitting in what appeared to be a conference room 3 floors below us. They looked frightened but unharmed. Because if this were a trap, your family would already be dead, and you'd be in the same room with them. I studied the video feed. My father was holding my mother's hand while my sister paced nervously near the window. They were alive, and they were in this building. But that didn't necessarily mean Catherine was trustworthy. Start explaining. Now. Why is a federal prosecutor working in the Kozlov organization's command center? Because 8 months ago, I discovered that the Meridian investment case was just the tip of an iceberg that went deeper into federal law enforcement than anyone imagined. Catherine moved to another workstation and began pulling up files. The Kozlov organization doesn't just launder money, Juniper. They recruit federal agents, prosecutors, judges, and analysts. They've been building a network inside law enforcement for over a decade. She opened a file that made my stomach drop. It contained personnel records for dozens of federal employees, including photos, financial information, and detailed notes about their recruitment or elimination. Garrett's file was there, showing payments dating back 3 years, which meant he'd been working for them before he'd even met me. Your fiancé wasn't assigned to infiltrate your life, Catherine continued. He was assigned to monitor you because the Kozlov organization had identified you as a potential threat 2 years before you ever encountered their money laundering operation. They knew that a forensic accountant with your skills would eventually find them. How did they know that? Because I told them. Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. Not intentionally, not knowingly, but I told them. 6 months after we closed the Meridian case, I was approached by what I thought were federal colleagues interested in consulting on similar cases. I shared information about our investigation methods, our personnel, our most effective analysts. I thought I was helping to improve financial crimes prosecution. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. You were recruited. I was manipulated. By the time I realized what was happening, they had enough information to destroy my career and enough leverage to ensure my cooperation. They offered me a choice: work with them to manage threats to their operation, or watch my family suffer the same fate they'd planned for yours. Catherine pulled up another file, this one showing surveillance photos of her own family, her husband, her 2 teenage daughters. They've been holding my family for 8 months, Juniper. Not physically, but through constant surveillance and implicit threats. Every case I've handled, every decision I've made, has been influenced by their leverage over me. So you've been feeding them information about federal investigations? I've been trying to minimize the damage while looking for a way to destroy them completely. When they assigned Agent Blackthorne to monitor you, I realized you might be the key to bringing down their entire network. You had the skills to trace their financial operations and the determination to see a case through to the end. Catherine moved to a third workstation, this one showing real-time feeds from multiple locations throughout the city. The storage unit, the evidence you found, I helped you collect that information during the periods when they were drugging you. They thought they were erasing your memory, but I was helping you create backup records of everything you discovered. On the screens, I could see chaos unfolding at multiple Kozlov locations. The warehouse where my family was supposedly being held was surrounded by federal vehicles. The chapel where Garrett had been waiting was being evacuated by bomb disposal units. Several other locations were showing signs of law enforcement activity. What's happening? Your ultimatum worked better than you expected. When you threatened to release their entire network, they had to activate emergency protocols. They're burning safe houses, evacuating command posts, and eliminating evidence as fast as they can. But they're also exposing themselves to surveillance they didn't know was in place. Catherine opened one final file, a massive organizational chart showing the Kozlov network structure, personnel, and operations across multiple states. I've been building this for 8 months, mapping every connection, every operative, every corrupted official. Your evidence was the final piece I needed to make the case bulletproof. You could have told me earlier. You could have warned me about Garrett. If I'd contacted you directly, they would have eliminated both our families immediately. I had to wait until they made their move, until they committed to a plan that would expose them completely. Your wedding day was supposed to be their perfect crime, but it's become their perfect downfall. On the communication monitor, I could see messages flooding in from Kozlov operatives across the network: command center compromised, federal raids in progress, network exposure imminent, execute final protocols. Catherine turned to me with an expression that mixed determination and desperation. They're about to activate what they call the nuclear option, simultaneous elimination of all witnesses, assets, and compromised personnel. That includes your family, my family, and dozens of other innocent people they consider security risks. How do we stop it? We give them something they want more than revenge. We give them a way out. Catherine moved to the central command console. The Kozlov organization is built on financial leverage and information control. If we can collapse their financial network and expose their information assets simultaneously, we can force them to choose between saving their money and saving their operations. She pulled up a screen showing bank account information for hundreds of shell companies and offshore accounts. I have access to their entire financial network. Every account, every transaction, every hidden asset they've accumulated over the past decade. If we freeze these accounts and release the information to international financial authorities, we can destroy their operational capacity within hours. What about our families? That's where you come in. You're going to walk into that conference room, face the people who've been holding your family, and offer them the one thing they never expected, a choice between their money and their lives. Catherine handed me a tablet containing what appeared to be transfer authorization codes for hundreds of millions of dollars. You're going to tell them that they can take their money and disappear, or they can continue their vendetta and lose everything. But they can't have both. And if they choose revenge? Then we go down fighting, but we take their entire network with us. Catherine looked at the monitor showing my family. Your parents raised a daughter who dedicated her life to financial justice. Your sister chose a career helping children. They deserve better than to die because criminals couldn't tolerate the existence of people who represent everything they're not. I looked at the tablet, at the screens showing federal raids in progress, at the video feed of my terrified family. For 18 months, the Kozlov organization had been 3 steps ahead of everyone who tried to stop them. They'd corrupted federal agents, manipulated prosecutors, and turned personal relationships into weapons. But they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed that fear would make people like Catherine and me compliant. They'd assumed that threats to our families would turn us into assets instead of enemies. They'd forgotten that sometimes, when you push someone far enough, they stop trying to survive and start trying to win. I took the tablet and headed for the elevator. Which floor? 20. Conference room C, Juniper. Catherine's voice stopped me at the elevator doors. Whatever happens in that room, remember that you're not just fighting for your family. You're fighting for every person they've threatened, every family they've destroyed, every life they've corrupted. Make it count. The elevator doors closed, and I rode down 3 floors to face the people who'd stolen my wedding day, terrorized my family, and destroyed my faith in the man I'd thought I was going to marry. But I wasn't the same woman who'd put on a wedding dress 8 hours ago. I was someone who'd learned that sometimes justice requires more than following proper procedures and filing the right paperwork. Sometimes justice requires walking into a room full of predators and proving that you're the most dangerous person there. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway lined with armed men who looked nothing like federal agents. These were private security contractors, the kind of people who asked no questions and left no witnesses. But what they didn't expect was a woman in a torn wedding dress who walked past them like she owned the building. I'm here to negotiate the release of the Ashford family, I announced to the nearest guard. I assume your employers are expecting me. Conference room C looked like a war room. Multiple screens showed news feeds of federal raids across the city, communication channels buzzing with panicked messages from Kozlov operatives, and real-time financial data indicating massive capital flight from compromised accounts. At the head of the table sat a man I'd never seen before but whose presence commanded the room, Viktor Kozlov himself. My family was seated along one wall, zip-tied to chairs but visibly unharmed. My father's eyes met mine with a mixture of relief and terror. My mother was crying silently. My sister mouthed, "I'm sorry," as if any of this was her fault. "Ms. Ashford." Victor's accent was subtle but unmistakable. "You've caused quite a disruption to our operations today." "Your operations caused quite a disruption to my wedding." I set the tablet on the conference table and remained standing. "But I'm here to offer you something your organization has never had before, a clean exit." Victor gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Let's discuss this like civilized people." "I'll stand, thanks." Civilized people don't kidnap families or blow up wedding chapels. I activated the tablet screen, showing the financial account interface Catherine had prepared. What you're looking at is real-time access to approximately $400 million in Kozlov organization assets across 17 countries. The room went dead silent. Victor's calm demeanor flickered for just a moment. "Those accounts are protected by encryption protocols and international banking laws that..." That mean nothing when you have the right access codes and the right federal authorization. I swiped to the next screen, showing a federal asset seizure warrant that Catherine had somehow obtained. This warrant authorizes the immediate freezing of all assets associated with the Kozlov organization's money laundering network. It goes into effect in exactly 15 minutes unless I call in a cancellation code. Victor leaned forward. You're bluffing. Try me. I pulled up another screen showing live feeds from the federal raids. Your warehouse operation is shut down. Your Chapel command post is evacuated. Your Miami, Las Vegas, and Chicago cells are all under federal surveillance. Agent Blackthorne is currently in federal custody explaining how he spent 18 months infiltrating my life for your organization. That last part was a bluff. I had no idea where Garrett was, but Victor's expression suggested he believed it. What do you want? I want my family released immediately. I want all surveillance and threats against federal prosecutor Catherine Blackwell and her family to cease permanently. I want your organization to withdraw from all operations in the continental United States within 48 hours. I paused, letting that sink in. And I want a written confession detailing your organization's infiltration of federal law enforcement agencies. Victor laughed. In exchange for what? Allowing us to keep money that's already ours? In exchange for me not releasing the complete organizational chart, personnel files, financial records, and operational protocols for your entire network to every law enforcement agency, news organization, and international financial authority in the world. I activated another screen showing the comprehensive file Catherine and I had compiled. This information includes the real names, locations, and criminal activities of every person who's ever worked for your organization, including the federal agents, prosecutors, and officials you've corrupted. The laughter stopped. If this information becomes public, your organization ceases to exist. Every safe house becomes a target. Every operative becomes a fugitive. Every corrupted official becomes a liability who'll turn on you to save their own careers. Your 18-month infiltration operation becomes evidence in hundreds of federal prosecutions. Victor studied the tablet screen, his jaw clenched. Around the table, I could see his lieutenants exchanging worried glances. These were people who'd built their lives on staying invisible, on operating through fear and manipulation. The prospect of complete exposure was their nightmare scenario. You're assuming we care more about money than about eliminating threats to our operations. I'm assuming you're smart enough to recognize when a situation has become unsalvageable. I gestured to the screens showing the federal raids. Your perfect plan failed. Your infiltration operation is exposed. Your most sensitive financial networks are compromised. You can salvage what's left and rebuild somewhere else, or you can double down on revenge and lose everything. One of Victor's lieutenants whispered something in his ear. Victor's expression darkened as he listened. It seems your federal friends have been more thorough than anticipated, he said finally. Reports indicate that our Chicago and Atlanta operations have been completely compromised. Our Miami facility is under siege. Several of our financial intermediaries have been arrested. The dominoes are falling, Victor. The question is whether you're going to get crushed under them or step out of the way. Victor stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. For a long moment, the only sounds in the room were the quiet sobs of my mother and the distant sirens that seemed to be coming from multiple directions. You realize that even if we accept your terms, there will be consequences. Other organizations, other networks that depend on our services. They won't simply allow us to walk away. That's your problem to solve. My problem is getting my family out of this room alive. Victor turned back to me. And if we refuse? If we decide that eliminating you and your family is worth the financial cost? I smiled for the first time in 8 hours. Then you should know that Catherine Blackwell has been monitoring this entire conversation through the building's security system. If anything happens to me or my family, the information releases automatically to every contact on a list that includes federal directors, international police agencies, financial regulators, and investigative journalists in 12 countries. You'll be the most wanted criminals in the world within 6 hours. Victor returned to the table and sat down heavily. You've been very thorough. I'm a forensic accountant. Thoroughness is what I do. He picked up a phone and spoke quietly in a language I didn't recognize. The conversation lasted several minutes. When he hung up, his shoulders had the defeated slope of a man who just agreed to something he didn't want to do. Your family will be released. The surveillance on Prosecutor Blackwell will cease. We will withdraw from continental United States operations within the agreed timeframe. He paused. The confession will be more limited than you requested. We cannot expose certain individuals without creating international incidents. As long as it includes enough information to prosecute the agents and officials you've corrupted, I can accept limited scope. Victor nodded to one of his men, who began cutting the zip ties holding my family. My father was the first to stand, immediately moving to embrace my mother. My sister ran to me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry this happened on your wedding day. It's not your fault, I said, holding her tight. None of this is your fault. Victor stood and extended his hand. You're a formidable opponent, Ms. Ashford. In different circumstances, we might have found a way to work together. I ignored the handshake. In different circumstances, you might not have been criminals. As my family moved toward the door, Victor called out one final time. This isn't over. There are other organizations, other networks. They'll see what happened here as a challenge. I turned back to face him. Let them come. They'll discover the same thing you did today. Some people can't be bought, intimidated, or manipulated. Some people will fight back, no matter the cost. And some people, I added, thinking about Garrett and the 18 months of lies he'd fed me, learn that betraying trust has consequences they never imagined. The elevator doors closed on my family and me for what I hoped would be the last time that day. But as we descended toward the lobby and safety, I knew that Victor was right about one thing: this wasn't really over. It was just the beginning of a much larger war. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, reviewing financial documents for a case that had nothing to do with money laundering, wedding sabotage, or criminal organizations that infiltrated federal law enforcement. Just a straightforward embezzlement investigation involving a nonprofit director who'd been skimming funds meant for homeless shelters. Simple, clean, and exactly the kind of work I'd thought I wanted to return to. But as I traced the paper trail of misappropriated donations, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting my time on small-scale problems while larger threats operated with impunity. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Blackwell. Coffee at 2 p.m.? Have something you'll want to see. I'd kept in touch with Catherine after we dismantled the Kozlov organization's American operations. She'd been reinstated to her position in Chicago after a thorough federal investigation cleared her of any willing collaboration with the criminals. Her testimony about their recruitment and manipulation tactics had led to the prosecution of 14 corrupted federal employees and the complete restructuring of financial crimes task forces across 6 states. But more than that, we developed the kind of professional relationship that's only possible between people who've saved each other's lives. Catherine arrived at the coffee shop carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone who discovered something both exciting and troubling. How's the nonprofit case going? She asked, settling into the chair across from me. Boring. Which is exactly what I thought I wanted. I closed my laptop. But I'm starting to realize that once you've taken down a multi-million-dollar criminal network, investigating small-scale fraud feels like hunting rabbits after you've fought lions. That's actually why I wanted to see you. Catherine opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. What would you say if I told you that the Kozlov organization was just one tentacle of something much larger? I looked at the documents, financial records, organizational charts, and communication intercepts that looked disturbingly familiar. I'd say that I'm not surprised, but I'm also not sure I'm ready to fight another war. These documents came from the federal investigation of the Kozlov assets we helped freeze. When the financial analysts started tracing the money backward, they discovered that the organization was funded by a consortium of criminal networks operating across 3 continents. The Kozlov Group was essentially a franchisee. Catherine pointed to a complex flow chart showing financial connections between dozens of organizations with names I didn't recognize. The parent network is called the Meridian Syndicate. They've been operating for over 20 years, establishing regional franchises that specialize in different types of criminal activity. The Kozlov organization handled law enforcement infiltration and high-value target elimination in North America. What do the other franchises handle? Political corruption in Eastern Europe. Corporate espionage in Asia. Human trafficking in South America. Drug distribution in Western Europe. Catherine's voice was grim. They're like a criminal multinational corporation, with specialized divisions and coordinated strategy. I studied the documents, my forensic accountant's brain automatically beginning to trace the financial connections and operational patterns. Why are you showing me this? Because the federal task force investigating the Meridian Syndicate has requested you specifically as a consultant. Your work dismantling the Kozlov financial network was so thorough that they want you to help trace the parent organization's assets. And you think I should do it? Catherine leaned back in her chair. I think you should know that 3 other people who've posed significant threats to syndicate operations have disappeared in the past 6 months. One was a federal prosecutor in Miami who was investigating their drug distribution network. One was a forensic accountant in London who'd traced some of their European assets. One was a journalist in Prague who'd been writing about their political corruption activities. The implication was clear. My victory against the Kozlov organization had made me a target for their parent network. So my choice is to help the federal task force go after them, or wait for them to come after me. Your choice is to be proactive or reactive. But either way, you're already involved. I thought about my family, who'd spent the past 6 months jumping at unexpected phone calls and checking over their shoulders in parking lots. I thought about my sister, who'd moved to a different city and changed her phone number twice. I thought about my parents, who'd installed a security system that would have been appropriate for a federal courthouse. The Kozlov organization might have been dismantled, but the fear they'd created in our lives hadn't disappeared with their operational shutdown. What would the federal task force position involve? Senior forensic consultant for international financial crimes. Based in Washington, D.C., with travel to international partner agencies as needed. Full federal security clearance, protective detail when warranted, and access to financial investigation resources that would make your previous work look like high school accounting. Catherine pulled out another document. The salary would be triple what you're making now. The pension benefits would set you up for life. And you'd be working on cases that actually matter on a global scale. And the risks? Significant. The Meridian Syndicate has resources and reach that make the Kozlov organization look like a neighborhood gang. They've been operating successfully for 2 decades by staying ahead of law enforcement and eliminating threats before they become problems. I looked around the coffee shop at people living normal lives, worrying about normal problems. 6 months ago, I'd been one of them. I'd thought my biggest challenge was planning a wedding and managing a complex financial investigation. I'd had no idea that there were criminal organizations sophisticated enough to infiltrate my personal life and plan my elimination with the precision of a military operation. There's something else, Catherine said quietly. We have reason to believe that Agent Blackthorne wasn't the only law enforcement operative they placed. The syndicate appears to have sleeper agents in federal agencies across multiple countries. People who've been building careers and relationships for years, waiting for activation orders. How many people are we talking about? Potentially dozens. Maybe hundreds. The Kozlov organization was their North American testing ground for infiltration strategies they've been refining globally. I thought about Garrett, about the 3 years of relationship that had been nothing more than a professional assignment for him. I thought about how easily he'd manipulated my emotions, my trust, my entire life trajectory. If there were dozens of other operatives like him embedded in law enforcement agencies around the world, how many other people were living lies without knowing it? The federal task force thinks you have the skills and experience to help identify these sleeper agents through financial analysis, Catherine continued. Your work tracing Garrett's activities showed that even the most carefully constructed cover identities leave financial fingerprints. You found patterns that other investigators missed. And if I say no? Then you go back to investigating nonprofit embezzlement while looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, hoping that the Meridian Syndicate decides you're not worth the trouble of elimination. I picked up the federal task force offer and read through the details. The work would be dangerous, complex, and would likely consume years of my life. But it would also be meaningful in a way that small-scale fraud investigation could never be. More importantly, it would be proactive rather than reactive. Instead of waiting for the next criminal organization to target me or my family, I'd be actively working to dismantle them before they could hurt anyone else. There's one condition, I said finally. What's that? My family gets full federal protection, not just me. If I'm going to make myself a target for international criminals, I want to make sure they can't use my loved ones as leverage. Catherine smiled. Already arranged. The task force considers family protection a standard part of the security package for high-value consultants. I signed the federal task force agreement right there in the coffee shop, 6 months after my wedding day had been destroyed by people who thought they could manipulate and eliminate anyone who threatened their operations. As I handed the signed documents back to Catherine, I realized that the woman who'd put on a wedding dress that morning in May was gone forever. She'd been replaced by someone harder, more strategic, and less trusting, but also more capable of fighting battles that actually mattered. The Kozlov organization had tried to destroy my life as a warning to others who might threaten their operations. Instead, they'd created their worst nightmare, someone with the skills to trace their money, the experience to understand their methods, and the motivation to see them completely eliminated. Some people say that the best revenge is living well. But sometimes, the best revenge is making sure that the people who hurt you never get the chance to hurt anyone else. My wedding day had been ruined, but my real life was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.